This is the first in a series on the Orchos Chaim Rosh. The Rosh, of course, is one of the great Rishonim, and the Orchos Chaim was a very short but significant work of Musar, which the Rosh produced. The Alta from Kelm and other Bali Musar were very fond of the Sefer, and I would like to do it. It's normally divided into 7 parts according to the days of the week. I would like to divide it into 10 parts, corresponding somewhat with the Alta from Kelm's idea of Asiri Yeh Kodesh, that the 10th day of in every sequence should be set aside for some deeper learning, and I would like to do it over the course of 10 of those Asiri days, beginning with today for me, which corresponds to the first day of Parshas Lech Lecha, Tavshin Pei Aleph, and I would like to comment a little bit as we go along in order to elucidate slow somewhat. Obviously, the Musar, it speaks for itself, but nevertheless, and so since there are about 132 seifim in the Sefer, plus the section of Shabbos at the end, which is not from the Rosh, evidently, we will try and do about 13 seifim in each section. So, Perek Aleph is, I should say, that there are several editions available on the web of the Sefer. You can find HebrewBooks.org. You can find it on Sefaria with a translation into English, and you can find it on Wikitext. I'll put a link in the comments to this video as is Hashem Yisbarach. So the first few in chapter 1, Perek Aleph of the Orchos Chaim, really in our modern parlance we would say have to do with the proper measure of self-esteem. And self-esteem means that a person has to know that he is a significant person with significant strengths and significant talent and significant potential and a neshama which is divine, and that a person has these tremendous connections to Shamayim and tremendous capacity to involve himself on Oretz, but in the proper proportions. Self-esteem should be neither too small nor too great. The greater self-esteem is, of course, more greater danger than lesser self-esteem. And therefore, Aleph in the Orchos Chaim is lisrachik min hagaiva betachlis harichuk, to distance oneself from arrogance, haughtiness, pride, many different ways of translating gaiva, all of which are correct, with the ultimate distance. Of course, that is in line with the Rambam's statement that gaiva and kas, which will come up later on, are the midos in which one has to distance oneself that to the utmost, not follow the golden mean, but rather go to the other extreme. And of course, the Chazal say that Baal Gaiva and the Shechina cannot exist in the same place. About the exaggerated sense of self-importance and significance of Gaiva is the root for most of the Averos which we have and which we are going to be warned against. Beis is the opposite. A person should not falsely flatter others. Now, of course, the Chazal say there are times when this is necessary, like the time of Sakana, such as the danger Yaakov faced when he came to meet Esau. But false flattery of others indicates normally that we do not have the proper self-esteem, and that means we're willing to flatter people who don't deserve flattery. We see that our own star, so to speak, is hitched to theirs, and therefore we go and we flatter them, and this creates also chilul Hashem, because obviously people are given honor who should not be given honor. So a person must distance himself from chanifus, because that indicates a lack of proper connection to one's own self-esteem, a lack of emunah and bitachon, which are intrinsic to that self-esteem. Also from lying and falsehood. A person who lies, a person involved in falsehood, obviously feels that they need a boost in order to achieve the one-upmanship that they're seeking over other people, and therefore they are willing to resort to unethical methods. In reality, this can result from either low self-esteem or high self-esteem. A person who feels too high, looks down at others, doesn't care about them, and therefore is willing to treat them shabbily, in fact, to lie and deceive them. A person who has low self-esteem feels that he needs to get ahead and resorts to desperate measures. That is also a recipe for sheker v'chazav. Dalit, v'chein min ha'leitzonus, from scoffing and mocking. A person who scoffs and mocks obviously feels that the thing which he's being told to do, or the musar he's being given, or the lofty ideas that are being imparted to him are a threat to that person's complacency that person's sense of self, that person's self-esteem, and therefore he rejects them. A person who has either too high, has too high a self-esteem will not see the need for constant improvement, which is, of course, what every person has to do and be involved with. And therefore, he's going to scoff and mock at people who try, and people or entities or things or books or ideas which try and improve and try and help and try and enhance a person. A person has to distance himself from gossip. Gossip is talking about other people. If a person has adequate self-esteem, they don't busy themselves with other people. They're not concerned with gossiping about them. Of course, besides that, it's in the Torah, but to gossip is to be concerned with other people and achieving one's significance by one's chatting about other people. That's not how one accomplishes significance in this world. And vav v'chein min hakas. Of course, anger is as you mentioned before, is one of the things the Rambam says. One has to distance oneself from very, very far. And the idea is that anger is, Chazal say, the Rambam says, it puts it slightly different, but the idea is that if a person has anger, it means he is an exaggerated sense of self-esteem. That person feels that I'm slighted, I've been wronged, and that means that you feel that your own personal ego has been hurt, has been impinged upon. And of course, that is a very bad meter for many reasons, but especially because a person cannot function normally and tranquilly and calmly and deliberately when a person is in a state of anger. Which leads us to the next one, which here in the Sfaria text I'm is put together, not sure why, Zayin Eches, Sheizohem Mimichshon Midorim, Me'anos Abrios, Hem B'mamon, Hem B'dvarim, Mikinasam, Umisinasam. So, it's a strange juxtaposition here, to be careful of Nidorim, and from treating other people badly, whether it's monetary or whether it's with words, and being jealous of them and detesting them, hating them. So the question is how Nidorim gets in here. So again, Nidorim are something which comes from an inflated sense of who you are and what you're capable of accomplishing. That's the Michshol of Nidorim. When a person takes upon himself a netter which he has no idea whether he can actually fulfill, and ultimately does not fulfill, that means that he did not know his station. He was not in touch with himself. He was not in sync with what goes on within him. And therefore, he took that netter, which is out of proportion and inappropriate for him, and leading to a michshol. Sabrios, of course, again means that either a person has a problem with their ego and their self-esteem, in the sense that they have to put others down and cheat others or taunt them in order to accomplish their feeling of victory or their sense of significance. And a person who is secure in his own knowledge of his place in the world and his own obligations in this world, he certainly will not try and be dishonest and try and taunt, not be dishonest and taunt other people. And of course, jealousy and hatred are outright problematic. There is no question about that. Jealousy only comes when I feel that somebody else impinges upon me. The extreme of jealousy, as Reb Tzadok points out, is murder, when I feel that his entire existence impinges upon me. And the detestation also comes usually from a person's feeling that that other person is somehow a thorn in my side. Again, these are issues of self-esteem. When a person feels their self-esteem or their ego is hurt by others, a person has to be careful, not whether it's the internal working on oneself. A person's self-esteem and self-dignity should be something which is internal, as opposed to as opposed to measured by externals. And of course, it's good to work on the symptoms as well. So if you can't eradicate the root problem, still you have to make sure to try work on the symptoms. And the test is a continuation of that. Not to give a nickname to one's friend. And not go and buy a nickname which others gave him. Unless this is going to be somewhere in which he can be mentioned and honored in that name. So, obviously, when dealing with other people and using nicknames, that puts other people down and rarely puts people up. The Rosh is actually telling us that if it were to put other people up, then it would be a good thing. But a person usually who calls a person by a nickname is in a subtle way denigrating that person or not granting him the proper significance which he deserves. Yud shelo yisaper lashon hara v'shelo yikablo. Of course, lashon hara is one of the great isurim which most people are nichshal in. It's different than rechilus in that. By rechilus, the gospel didn't say, it just said not be involved in rechilus, but here it says not, because rechilus is just idle chatter. It goes back and forth. It's specifically not to tell it and not to receive it, because there are specific parameters about what's lashon hara as opposed to rechilus, which is a much more broad category. So obviously, lashon hara, when if a person hears it, a person says it, a person hears it, again means a person believes it. I score myself off of other people, and that again is throughout what we're trying to say, all under the heading of lisrachik min hagaiva. Yud Aleph shelo yeshev im yoshvei kornos lo b'shivas batei knesset shel amei haaretz. Not to sit with people in the corners. That's people in the corners in the marketplace. In other words, people who are idle and are not involved in yeshuv shalom and doing constructive activity in this world. And even yeshivas batei knesset shel amei haaretz, in a place where people are sitting and not involved in matters of uplifting and learning and growing, which is can be a base necessity of Amei Haaretz. There too, that is going to bring you down, and this is an important point to make, which is that your person is affected, and their sense of self is affected, and their destiny and mission is affected by the chevra which they keep. If you're there to teach them, that's one thing. If you're there to try to get them to do tshuva, that's one thing. But if otherwise, it's something which has to be avoided, of course. As we know, histaklu specifically refers to gazing with focus and intent. A person, it's not talking about ri'ah ba'alma. It's not talking about just seeing or looking while one is conversing with somebody, but it's a focus and intent, and it's one which, of course, has a lascivious and negative aspect to it. And this is something which, of course, in our day and age is perhaps much more significant than the time of the Rosh. It's hard to understand for me back then what was so when women were mostly tznius, and at least according to our standards, what exactly was going on. That they had to be so nizar, but alachas kama b'kama that one has to be nizar today. Yud Gimel, a fascinating one. Shelo yasiach al kos shel bracha, not to talk while one is holding a kos shel bracha. Now, I don't remember this from Shas and Poskim, but that's not evidence. But there's a fascinating idea, which is davening. It's very hard to focus, because there's no thing tangible to focus on. When you're holding a kosher bracha is a cup of kiddush, a cup of benching, and this cup obviously is something tangible you can focus on, and that's why it says you're supposed to look at the kosher bracha, and this is something which represents mikudusha, hakaras hatov, shevach, vodah, many things, and it's there, and you can focus on it, and if a person is able to focus on kosher bracha, perhaps it's going to stand out to other things. So I think that the Le'asiyah kosher bracha is a stepping stone to be able to focus on one's primary focus, what one should focus on in all one's other endeavors. Yudalit. Not to talk from the time you begin Baruch Shamar until you finish Shemona Esrei. And not when the Shliach Tzibur is repeating the Shemona Esrei. Only came b'divrei Torah or b'dvar mitzvah or l'osei shalom hachzir shalom, unless it is a matter of the Torah, a dvar mitzvah, or to give shalom and return shalom. Now, this is really a very halachic issue, and there are many halachas involved in this, and I think the Rosh is focusing on here not so much from the halachic perspective, but from the Musar perspective. And again, before we spoke about focusing on a kosher bracha. Now we talking about focusing on tefillah, and tefillah and is something which is again difficult to focus on. But part of the focus is simply not to talk about other matters, even if it's something which is mutter to talk about. If it's not something which is of a high and lofty purpose, one is supposed to avoid it. So again, this is halacha. But besides that, there's the musar of focus. You do not get distracted as much as you possibly can. And a person is supposed to be able to develop that focus more easily in things where it is easier. Kosher bracha was first, tefillah is next, and tezvav shlo yidaber bekriyas b'halel v'lo b'od sheshliach tzibur korei b'torah. Person, you should not speak during Hallel and when the shliach tzibur is reading the Torah. Again, these are halachic issues, but the point is that focus is key, and the focus is the idea which a person should have in mind whenever a person possibly can, to focus one's mind, not get distracted, kind of like having blinders on, and of course halacha helps us in that quest. Okay, so we did today to Sif Tezvav, and Yirtzeh Hashem will continue next time.